Hello, and welcome to CS492F in fall 2023 at KAIST. Experimental course about futures of the world with emphasis on plural futures. Inspired by a book by KAIST President Lee Kwang-yong, we want to explore and think about possible futures of the world, to practice prediction of captioning, to practice prediction and governance stewardship for a long-term perspective. Here you see the book, and in this course, which is an experimental education 4.0 course, we want to practice some basic prediction and planning with emphasis first on joint prediction and planning. Namely, we're going to have some assignments that you will be asked to work on in groups. Second, it will be large scale. And third, it will be long-term prediction and planning. And this is something new to humanity, arguably. This is also new to me. So in this course, I'm not really a teacher and educator, but I'm also participating in this experimental course. And the long-term goal is to prepare us, to prepare humanity for passing the great filter. So let me start with some motivation. Human population throughout the centuries. Currently, human population is several billion. And let me show you a video from the American Museum of Natural History. So you see how much population has grown and how fast it has accelerated and the impact that had on Earth that is roughly 4 billion years old and has been affected by humans only throughout the last 100,000 years, mostly in the past 1,000 years, and even more so in the past 100 and in the past 10 years. How is that going to continue? In a sense, we have taken over control of the Earth, and maybe we're not really aware of it because it happened inadvertently. So let's move on to discuss possible futures of human civilization based on the so-called Kardev scale of also interplanetary possible civilizations. So we're currently a type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization. And according to Kardev, the next stage will be a type 2, a stellar civilization, a civilization which is in control not only of the planet Earth, but of the solar system, including other planets and including the sun. And then, hypothetically, the next type 3 is a galactic civilization. And there are also variations, intermediate stages, biological, planetary, and so on. But the point is, how is it possible to go beyond type 1, to reach type 2? Are there any other civilizations who have undergone that transition? We don't really know about other type 1 civilizations because of the distances between solar systems and between galaxies. But if there are type 2 civilizations or even type 3 civilizations, then we should be able to see them, right? And that's what the SETI project is about, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. You might have seen the famous movie with Jodie Foster called Contact. But the question really is, why is there no type 2 or type 3 civilization visible? And the common hypothesis is that there exists something like a great filter, namely that civilizations, different civilizations indicated here with the green lines, originate, species origin, and then evolve, have some evolutionary leaps like here and here, commonly achieved evolutionary leaps, but that there is a kind of great filter, evolutionary leap that no civilization has passed yet, and that this is the reason why we cannot see other reference type 2 or even type 3 civilization, and that on turn means that we, humanity and Earth, are currently approaching apparently this great filter. And the huge question is, are we going to be able to make it past the great filter, or are we going to be stuck and die before the great filter? And to illustrate the importance and the sensitivity of passing this hypothetical great filter, let's look at another video, again from the American Museum of Natural History, regarding tipping points. Tipping points means that they're small, like butterfly effect, a small change in behavior can have a huge impact on future evolution and can determine whether one makes it past or the great filter, or whether one gets stuck and even dies before the great filter. So let me share you the next video on tipping points by the American Museum of Natural History. So the situation is a very volatile. And over the past centuries, when there were few humans, the climate and the Earth evolution was basically governed by Earth itself. But as humankind has reached 8 billion people and it has also affected many aspects of our own environment, and some negatively, some positively. But the thing is, we don't really know how our technologies really affect our environment in the long run. We have not evolved in order to control and govern a large system as large as the Earth. We are the result of natural selection, and we have evolved in order to survive in jungle or savanna or in woods, to run around to avoid hitting trees while running, while chasing after deer. But we are not equipped mentally for such a huge task of managing an entire ecosystem. And we only have one attempt at going on, right? That's a great filter. This is like, imagine you set a toddler into a car and the toddler has one chance of managing to drive the car, which it has never done before, and which is also, beyond its training, beyond its obvious capabilities. This is the state that humanity is in right now. And I'd like to illustrate that with a quote from Edward Wilson. Edward O. Wilson was a biologist, and he wrote, "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have paleolithic emotions, right? So we have evolved and our emotional system is 100,000 of years old. We have institutions from the Dark Ages, including, for example, universities. And we have developed, using these institutions, we have been able to develop godlike technology, planes that fly through the air, fire that burn, atomic energy. This is truly godlike technology. And this combination is terrifically dangerous. And it is now approaching a point of crisis overall. That is possibly the great filter. Can we make it past the great filter? And if so, how? The answer is we should learn how to plan ahead, how to how to steer such a huge ecosystem. And like driving a car, we should start slowly, maybe in the first gear. And this lecture is kind of a first step, an attempt in doing that. So how to make it past the great filter? By practicing planning ahead on a small scale first. Well, can we really plan ahead? Animals, can they plan ahead? Squirrels, for example, bury nuts before the winter comes as a source of supply during the cold time when there is no food growing on the snow. But this is really planning ahead. This is a result of natural selections. Those squirrels that made these deposits survived the winter and were able to procreate in the next spring, and those who didn't simply didn't survive. So this is not a conscious act of planning. This is a result of natural selection with many failed attempts. Many squirrels simply didn't make it because they didn't create such deposits. But as I keep emphasizing with the great filter, we really have no several attempts. This is no chance for trial and error. This is one and for all. Another example of birds moving to the south during the winter, but again, this is not cognitive planning. This is a result of natural selection, or salmon jumping up in order to spawn, not cognitive planning, but the result of natural selection. Now, how about the crown of creation, humanity? Can we do better? Well, we do plan ahead, at least a little bit, by saving for pension, or in chess, we may think ahead several moves. And there's also a very good book that I, by the way, recommend to anyone, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. And one important aspect conveyed by this book is to carefully notice when your motorcycle starts showing signs of deviation, and then early trying to fix the problems, recognize and fix the problems, because recognizing and fixing problems early is much easier and cheaper and more effective than continuing running with these problems until maybe your motor blows up and your entire motorcycle is a waste. So, very good message conveyed in this book. As I said, I really recommend it, is noticing when something goes wrong as early as possible and make countermeasures as early as possible. Now, are we doing that? Are we humanity doing that? Well, when it comes to climate change, not at all. We keep on going and going and going, right? How about ourselves? If we grow fat, maybe, do we start take action immediately? I don't think so, and that includes myself. So this is illustrating that even we humans, although we are much more capable of planning ahead than animals, still we're very limited and far too limited to the task of managing an entire ecosystem like the Earth. And even professional predictions have often turned out to be wrong, right? So, for example, in 1903, it was predicted that the automobile is a fad. It will short-lived effect, and it will fade away again. Or 1920, a rocket will never work. 1949, computers will weigh just 1.5 tons. And 1955, nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners will become a reality. And there's a very funny book, actually, about 100 failed predictions. So it's really, really hard to make predictions, particularly when concerned with the future. I think this is a quote from Winston Churchill. Why is it so hard? What can we predict and what can we not predict? I mentioned the butterfly effect, and I mentioned that the entire system is often very volatile and susceptible to small changes. And for that reason, some things are inevitably hard or even impossible to predict. It's like trying to predict how a dice falls when you throw a dice, right? It's intrinsically hard and maybe even impossible to predict how the dice roll comes out. That's what casinos are based on. That's what random generators are deliberately based on, to make it hard to predict, right? Now, there's of course, in theoretical physics, there's a famous Maxwell demon which is a thought experiment that knows all states of all atoms in the world, and based on that is able to predict the entire future of everything. But that's an entirely hypothetical concept, and also quantum mechanics and thermodynamics basically both prohibit it and the existence of such a demon. So the message here is that such volatile aspects of the future are intrinsically impossible, and we maybe shouldn't even try to predict them. So what instead can we predict? Some aspects of the future can be predicted, and this is something I'd like to call asymptotic futurology. Let me give again a very simple example, namely of this ball game, right? So you see here a board with nails, and if you drop a ball here on top of this is called a Galton board, by the way. And if you drop a ball in here, again, it's impossible to predict where the ball will end up, right? This is a kind of a physical random number generator. We can calculate the probability. There will be a probability distribution. It is more likely to end up around the middle than towards the end. But where one ball ends up, that's really basically impossible to predict, because that's indeed one of the examples of such a volatile effect. On the other hand, we can easily predict that the ball will end up at the bottom, right? We don't know in which box it will end up, but at the bottom it will end up for sure. And this is an illustration that some aspects of your future can be predicted. Some aspects are inevitable, like the ball ending up at the bottom. So this is the essence of asymptotic futurology, trying to predict what will happen eventually without saying when it happens. We don't try to predict when the ball arrives at the bottom, right? It might bounce off repeatedly, and predict things that are inevitable. Yeah, this is like in computer science, where we use big O and asymptotic notation, because we can say that maybe bubble sort has asymptotic quadratic running time. We don't know the constant factors. It did the big O, and for some inputs, it might actually even be faster. Maybe 10 for sorted inputs that are already sorted. It has only linear running time, right? But we deliberately use asymptotic big O analysis to simplify the analysis. And here we're doing the same for futurology, focusing on asymptotic properties that are inevitable and that happen eventually, like in big O notation for large enough n, sufficiently large without telling what sufficiently large really means. So we don't try to predict when these effects happen, and we don't even try to predict how they happen. And this is a basic concept, and very similar to what Elon Musk actually calls first principles, thinking from first principles. And that's how he ended up, for example, creating his SpaceX company by analyzing first principles of economy of rockets, reusing rockets. Let me give maybe another example beyond this Galton ball, namely travel between Korea and Japan. How are we currently traveling between Korea and Japan? Well, there are planes, of course, and then there's a very fast ferry commuting between Busan and Fukuoka, right? Beetle. But eventually, there will be a tunnel. This is so natural. If you look at the geography, this is equally natural as Nowadays, we know that there's a tunnel between Europe and England, right? The Eurotunnel. And for centuries, this tunnel was in people's minds, and maybe already 100 years ago, it was easy to predict that at some point there was going to be a tunnel between Europe and England. Couldn't predict when that tunnel was going to be built, but this is an example of something that is eventually inevitable. And the same for a tunnel between Korea and Japan. We cannot predict when this tunnel will be built. We cannot predict where it will end up, maybe in Busan or in Goje, but eventually this tunnel will be built. This is one example of asymptotic futurology and prediction. Before that tunnel will be built, it's much easier to build an electric cable. So that's another example of prediction, and here we can even predict the order. First, the power cable will be built between Korea and Japan. And the reason for such a power cable is manifold. For example, one can then balance out the energy production, electricity production, and electricity consumption between countries. This is actually what has been going on in Europe for decades already, and this is what enabled Germany to step out of nuclear energy production, because whenever Germany needs electricity, it will just buy electricity from neighboring countries using the global European electricity grid. And when some country has a surplus in electricity and another needs electricity, maybe because of different time zones, when people turn on the coffee machine in one country, then they're already done with breakfast in the other country. So all this balancing of electricity needs is much easier with having such a grid. And between Japan and Korea, this is a natural and again, eventually inevitable process to build such a power cable. And technologically, engineering this is not so hard. Remember that there already exists such a power cable between mainland Korea and Jeju-do, which is 105 kilometers, and that powers the entire island of Jeju, whereas to Fukuoka, it's only 50 kilometers to the island, and then another 140, 150 kilometers. So it's only 50% longer than the existing cable. So these are two examples of asymptotic futurology, predicting things that are eventually inevitable. And we can even predict that first the power cable will be built and then the tunnel will be built. We cannot predict when exactly this will happen, and the technological details are also beyond our realm and beyond our point of interest. So when and how, we don't know, but that this will happen is inevitable. So this is a maybe more involved example of asymptotic futurology, a little bit more involved than Galton's board. So in this course, in the first part before the midterm, we will learn about more examples of predictions from history, successful and failed predictions. We will learn about methods for trying to approach such predictions. Will be mostly lecture style with discussion. And then comes the midterm, and after the midterm, this is education 4.0. After midterm, we will do flipped learning, and you will take over teaching. And to this end, we will form 7 groups of 3 students each. And each group will cover one of 7 possible topics. and try to make an asymptotic prediction about that topic. Then we'll try to create regulation, rules, stewardship to control, to guide that future towards a positive outcome, the sense of tipping points. And then you will give a presentation about your prediction and about your stewardship. So here are the 7 topics to be presented by you and to be predicted by you. The prediction should and the meeting should start early, but the presentation will be after the midterm, so that by then you will all be done with predicting asymptotically and with setting up rules for stewardship to this goal. So here's the first topic: future of occupation and economics. So in the previous ages, in the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, most of occupation was farming, right? And nowadays we mostly have white-collar jobs, sitting in offices, and this has changed the economics. In the Dark Ages, people didn't really need money because most was based on exchange of goods. Then money was introduced, first gold, and then paper money, and nowadays we have bitcoins. So how do you think will look like the future of occupation, of professions and economics? And how can we steer and guide that future to be a positive one and not a dystopian one? That's topic A. Topic B is about the future of geopolitics and governance, right? So in the Dark Ages, was kings were the rulers. Nowadays we have democracies, but democracies also seem to be in decline. Some countries resort to autocratic leaders. And then there's wars, right? But recently, wars are mostly failing, right? If you think about all the wars of the past 50 years, they were fails, right? Vietnam War was a failure. Currently, the invasion of Ukraine is failing in spite of this tremendous imbalance in size and power. So maybe the age of wars finally comes to an end. And how does it affect the future of geopolitics, and how is the future of governance? That's the second topic. Third topic is about the future of ecology and sustenance. We talked already a lot about our environment and how human footprint affects that. How can we mend that? How can we steward to a promising future? And how can we feed people sustenance? And also feed animals, right? So currently, for example, we're eating meat. Is the future maybe vegetarian? Will we stop eating meat altogether? That's one of the questions to ponder on this topic C. Moving on to topic D, fourth topic. What is the future of transportation and travel? Right. So in the Dark Ages, it was mostly by foot and by horse, and very few very rich people could afford traveling by chariot, but this was really terrible, and the roads were not good. The Romans built the first good roads. Nowadays we have individual transport like cars, we have bicycles, We have rental cars and rental bicycles, right? We have taxis, so we don't even need to own a car. We have kickboards, we have planes, we have trains. So what is the long-term future of transportation? And what is the long-term future of travel? To make it sustainable, remember, asymptotic, right? And it's obvious that our current transportation system is not sustainable, right? So planes really impact our climate, and eventually fuel will run out. So in the sense of asymptotic futurology, what is a sustainable, what is a form of transportation and travel? These are questions to consider in topic number 4D. Topic 5E, how about future societies and future value and belief systems? You know that there's a considerable difference in societies between like Western societies and maybe Eastern societies, but even among Western societies and among Eastern societies, there are significant differences, right? So if you travel to Japan, the Japanese society is different from the Korean society, it's different from the Chinese society, and Western society are even much more different, right? Italian society, German society, France, UK. So with the current globalization, will the differences between societies become smaller? Will they adapt and become one homogeneous society? Maybe something like the New York, the big melting pot, or will it re-enhance, maintain differences? And how about the value and belief systems? Because societies are heavily based on different values and belief systems. Confucianism here in Korea, for example, um, and Christianity also here in Korea. United States is heavily influenced by Christianity. Other states are dedicatedly secular. So what is the future of societies and value belief systems? This is item 5E. Item 6F is about the future of education and entertainment, right? So education systems, school systems have developed considerably over the past 100, 150 years, right? Remember that mandatory schools were introduced only like 150 years ago, I guess. And now we have all this, we have nursery schools where kids already start to learn English, right, in nursery schools. And then there's elementary school, middle school, high school, college, university. So how will that evolve in future? And also how will entertainment evolve, right? So like television had a huge impact and changed entertainment entirely. And nowadays we all have our laptops and can access YouTube at any moment and watch whatever we want. So we're not even dependent anymore on a broadcast program. How will that evolve in future? It's a very difficult but also very important question, I think. And again, all from the perspective of asymptotic futurology, something sustainable, something that will last, uh, um, something how things will end up eventually, not necessarily in 5 or 10 years, but eventually. And the final 7th point is about the future of health and medicine, right? So medicine has also made tremendous progress, right? So in the Middle Ages, surgery was basically a death sentence. And nowadays we do that routinely and even enhance our bodies with plastic surgery. Health care is a very great improvement, particularly in Korea, whereas in the United States, healthcare is a kind of two-class society, those who have it and those who don't, right? So, and then come the question of triage, right? So when there's too many, or when things become too difficult, too expensive, how do you choose? So this is all ethical, very difficult questions, and we should think about this asymptotically in the long run sustainable. So these are the 7 topics. Now, I must say, if you want to come up with another, maybe an 8th topic, or we can also split one topic into 2. The number 7 topic really comes from the 7 weeks, 14 sessions that we have after the midterm. If we need another 8th topic, then we need to start earlier, maybe even before the midterm. But let's, for now, let's stick to the 7 topics. And but now I'd like to make a short break here and enable some discussion and some questions with you before we proceed to topic assignment. So let's stop here for a minute to give you the chance to discuss and ask questions. So I'm now going to enable unmuting yourself and starting video. But please be aware that you're being recorded, okay? So if you don't want to be recorded, then keep your video off and keep your microphone shut. You're also always welcome to write comments in the chat to ask questions. And so this is what we want to do now. Take a break to engage in some discussion, answer your questions, and receive your comments. Yes, in order to pass this course, right, this is only a pass and fail course. So you won't receive a letter grade, only pass and fail. And in order to pass, you need to work in a group of 3. You need to form a group of 3, and you need to start in your topic discussing possible asymptotic futures. So if you're in the group discussing topic A, then you're supposed to meet regularly in the group and discuss possible asymptotic futures, right? Plural, sesanguimire, future, possible futures of application and economics. And I strongly recommend that you do that as early as possible, because predicting the future cannot be done on the last minute, right? That's a paradox. That's the whole point. That's what's going wrong with the climate change. People try to postpone it to the last minute, and that's not going to work. So you're also supposed not to postpone until the last minute. Start brainstorming together, jointly. This is very important. Don't split up the work. Don't have one student do the prediction and another student do the presentation. Do it together, okay? Jointly. This is also essential to practice for the future of humanity, to make it past the great filter, that people become better at collaborating, at working together, rather than at competing with each other. Competition is really going to kill us and not help make it past the great filter. Collaboration. So we want to do that on a small scale here in groups of 3. So meet regularly to discuss possible asymptotic futures of, let's say, occupation and economics, discuss how to governance, stewardship, how to steer among the several possible futures, how to steer humankind towards a favorable asymptotic future. And then after the midterm, present your predictions, your thoughts, and your governance, your stewardship. So therefore, in order to pass this course, you must be a member of a group of 3 assigned to one topic. And since we have 7 topics, that means we're going to 21 students will be able to pass this course. 3 students, a group of 3 for each of the 7 topics makes 21 students. And anyone who doesn't make it into this assignment is highly welcome to audit, but unfortunately will not be able to get a credit for this course. If you don't make it into this course, then you still have time and the opportunity to switch to another course. And 2 courses that I recommend among the many options are other slots of CS492. There's a slot version of CS492 offered by Professor Sokyong Ryu about the future of technology, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a course offered by the new joint Professor Joseph Searing about human-computer interaction in social media. So these 2 courses are highly recommended for those who don't make it into this course, but also for those who make it into this course. So let me show you the links, right? So here's the course CS492E, Technology for Impact by Professor Sokyong Ryu. And here's the course CS492H, Trust and Safety Engineering and Practice by Professor Joseph Searing. And my course here is CS492F. Okay?